Hey everyone, and welcome to a special episode of the podcast Surprise. I'm super excited to be here, and it's been a while since we had Michal because of the whole Novellan situation. You all know about it. Just kidding. Really excited to be back. These have been few and far between because of all of our schedules and everything that's going on in my life. So we really appreciate you coming out here with us tonight. But without further ado, I would like to introduce my podcast co-hosts, Aziz and Michal. Michal, let's go with you first. How's it going?
Hey, it's going good. It's nice to be back. It's like, oh my God, Witcher's real again. This is happening. For so long, it was just the books, and then, yeah.
We've kind of waited 2 years, kind of almost 2 years for this, right? We're anticipating the second season releasing next month.
It
It's what? I
basically is.
mean,
Yeah, it's two.
five
It's two
weeks from
years.
now? That's pretty crazy.
It makes me think about how if the season one hadn't been as successful as it was, as we know, it was very successful. Like if it hadn't been really successful, it might not have made it through the pandemic. A lot of shows were casualties of production cuts and all sorts of other things. So let's all be thankful that ours made it through not only well, but pretty darn strong. The future looked bright, like you said. So
Season 3 already renewed, and they're already in pre-production for The Witcher season 3, meaning we could possibly get a season 3 come holiday time next season, not the 2 year wait. But today we got a special episode. And like I said, we're going to be doing some awesome Witcher content, of course, with the season 2 of The Witcher dropping soon. So that'll be really fun. Of course, we've done, if you haven't checked out our podcast, we got two versions of it. The one we do on YouTube like this, we go live. And we also got the podcast version, which you can find on anchor.fm. If you look right above us, you'll see the ticker anchor.fm, the podcast Surprise. We have our playlist there, and you can check out the first two books. We finished the first two books, all the short stories. We go into the mythology, the characters, the kingdoms, and everything that you need to know about The Witcher. And I think we do a pretty good job. Lots of laughs, good vibes. You know, we talk about fairy tales, Andrei Sapkowski's influences, and we're going to talk about some of that today, which is going to be really cool. And really exciting that we get to talk about another product of I like to call it the Witcherverse now, because see, it seems like they're going to be doing on Netflix. They're going to be making another animated series. We'll talk about that towards the end of the stream and just kind of some upcoming things for The Witcher. But this stream, I talk about the Nightmare of the Wolf and the story of Vesemir, School of the Wolf, Declan, and kind of what really went on at Kaer Morhen. That's a pretty big deal for setting up season 2. So yeah. Kind of, are we going to do first impressions? We're going to do synopses. How are we jumping in here?
Let's start with just a few basics about the production, and then we'll do the synopsis and our reactions. I just wanted to give a few production details. I took a few notes. This is pretty much all from IMDb and a few other places. Screenplay was by Beau DeMayo, who wrote the third episode of season 1. Also, Betrayer Moon, the one with the Striga, if you like going by, Friends titles. The one with that's a good way to do it. He also co-produced 2 of the other episodes. And he's associated with the show The Originals, and he's been making League of Legends short films, so that's cool. I don't know much about League of Legends, but it sure is
showrunner for
huge.
Blood Origin, Witcher, by the way, as well.
Oh, is he also? I don't know how I missed that, but good call. So this
sounds like a nerd, guys.
Yeah, so it's a good thing we have each other's backs here. So, and it's officially part of the show canon, like Kyle said. It was successful enough that they're commissioned a second one. I don't think we know a lot about it, but it has been commissioned. I think it's neat that it's Studio Mir and the character is Vesemir, but hey, that's just a coincidence. This mostly comes from book canon, but like very vague details. We knew there was some sort of pogrom at Kaer Morhen. There's not much else about it. There's some in-world texts written about the evil of Witchers. Some of them don't even have authors. So really, they took a lot that was there and just filled in, gave a lot of detail. Some of it maybe lightly conflicts with existing canon, but very little. I think it's just details they fooled with a little bit. As far as like timelines, very small changes there. It mostly fits in with the book world as well, but it is show canon, not book canon. So this world is particularly confusing because we have game canon, we have book canon, we have show canon, there's actually multiple game canons.
Some game canon stuff is going to show up in season 2. We'll talk about that when the show drops.
And lots of headcanons.
Yeah, exactly. So standard warnings apply as far as canon. It's one of the harder things to keep track of, but we try not to make too big a deal out of it. Just keep it light and fun. So yeah, this is a story about mentoring, about Geralt's mentor, and Geralt's about to be Ciri's mentor. So mentoring is just dead center theme fits really well. It's awesome. I love it. This all is about 100 years before, I think, before season 2 / Blood of Elves. I guess that's about, is that right, guy? Do you have that same timeline
Ish.
roughly? Ish, yeah. I guess it's ish. It's not precise, which
Vesemir's an
allows
old
them
guy.
to.
Let's just say that.
Yeah. So like you said, Kyle, it's going to be a significant part going forward. It's really nice how well it fits in with what's already there. It's not just like some other story completely unrelated to everything. It's very much in line. So you guys have any other
Vesemir.
comments, or otherwise
Vesemir,
I'll
a
just...
fan favorite character, Michal. Obviously, Kim Bodnia is a great actor. We're super excited to hear about him. But Vesemir, fan favorite character in the games, also the books, going to be a huge part of kind of how they shape the story of not only what Witchers are, but this kind of frames a little bit of the dark history of the Witchers. That Geralt is out doing kind of his own stoic thing, but there is a very dark history behind some of the other people that kind of founded the School of the Wolf.
Yeah. All right, let's do the synopsis.
All right,
and then
sounds good.
react.
Let's go.
Cool. The film begins with a beautiful and haunting song of unusual meter that quickly transitions into a slaughter, followed by an epic battle between Aleshin and Vesemir, who is a witcher and kind of a jerk with a giant ego, rooted in being extremely good at witchering. The Leshin is also rooted, as tree creatures tend to be. End of sentence. But at the end of the fight, it speaks. Even the cocky Vesemir is put off by this because it's not supposed to do that. Though there are quite a few supporting characters, the story is focused on Vesemir and 4 others, in particular Ileana, also called Lady Zerbst, human sorceress Tetra Gilcrest, an elven sorceress responsible for that Leshen just now named Kitsu, and Deglin, the head of the Witcher School of the Wolf, which is also the primary location of the story and film. We're given a flashback to young Vesemir and young Ileana meeting Deglin. Having caught them stealing a plant used to ward away evil, he blackmails them into giving him this job to ward away evil instead, which turns out to be a creature called a Mar. Deglin wants it alive, though he's forced to kill it after letting Vesemir try to capture it unsuccessfully. Despite the error, Deglin tosses him a few coins for snacks and foreshadowing. Stuff like that. So soon enough, Vesemir is training to become a witcher alongside many other boys his age. Trainees are subjected to a horrific survival test in a place called the Red Swamp. Those who make it out alive are subjected to the mysterious trial of the grasses, and even more children die. He had no idea it would be this awful, but he survives and emerges via montage as an adult and very successful witcher, killing monsters of all kinds, but favoring the more dangerous types because they pay better. He even strikes up a friendship with Filavandrel, whom we've met before, but the friendship isn't enough for him to help the elf when he asks for help locating missing elven children. There's no money in that, hence me calling him a bit of a jerk. There's a dark truth behind all this. The head sorcerer at the School of the Wolf is Riedrich, and he reveals that a lot of monsters in the world were created by mages, and some of the same magic called mutagenic alchemy that made those monsters was used to create the process that produces witchers and a lot of dead children. It's only one step away from crossbreeding monsters directly with humans, and indeed that step has basically been taken already, or at least almost, because Kitsu, the elven sorceress, is herself a hybrid of an elf and a Mar, the same type of creature we just saw in the flashback. Worse, Kitsu was made specifically by Riedrich with Deglin's assistance, so we now know why he wanted that Mar alive. So unbeknownst to Vesemir, the very school that made him is also creating some of the very monsters that he is being contracted to kill over the course of several decades. Worse, the sorceress Lady Tetra suspects exactly this and seeks to prove it. In this era, witchers are more acceptable in society than they are in Geralt's time, but they're not exactly popular. So Lady Tetra has a little convincing to do. She argues her case before the king, and her opponent in the debate is none other than Lady Zerbst. Ileana is a clever diplomat, and the result of this debate is that Tetra and Vesemir go off to work together, bantering all the way to Ardcarre and quite a bit after. She accuses Vesemir and all witchers of creating monsters like Kitsu, that they're running a giant scam on humanity, making monsters terrible enough to demand large payments to kill. She's completely right about it, though Vesemir still doesn't know it himself. They track down Kitsu and discover that Filavandrel is imprisoned in her laboratory, having been captured while searching for the missing children that Vesemir wouldn't help with. Kitsu learned how to use the very mutagenic alchemy that created her and has set up her own series of experiments on elven children to make more like herself. Her work, like that at Kaer Morhen, has also resulted in horrors like the talking Leshy. Though they defeat Kitsu, secretly Tetra's working with her, but only so far as to make use of her. Tetra's playing both sides. Of course, it's clear why Kitsu would want to take revenge on the School of the Wolf. She doesn't need much convincing. She hates Witchers already, for obvious reasons, and so does Tetra, because she reveals her own mother was slain by a corrupt Witcher who accused her of a crime she didn't actually commit. It was just a greed move. Tetra's goal is to turn what she sees as various forms of evil against each other, and her plotting is largely successful. The King of Caedwin's convinced, and he turns on Kaer Morhen too. With his backing, Tetra also inflames the already angry common folk of the region who are upset about the recent deaths at the hands of Kitsu's creations. She tells them it's all the fault of the Witchers. And since they created Kitsu, she's not even really lying about that part. So it comes that Tetra leads a small army of knights and commoners and others to Kaer Morhen with destruction in mind. Under normal circumstances, they would never fight alongside creatures like Kitsu and her summoned monsters, but the furor against the Witchers is reached such a fever pitch that the enemy of their enemy is their friend, for the moment at least. Words don't do it justice, but it's incredibly epic and bloody, and almost everyone dies. Witchers, monsters, mages, townsfolk. One of my fellows wrote here, this is basically the whole Witcher saga in a nutshell. Hard to disagree with that. Illusion and misdirection have been a key part of the story all the way through, and in the story's conclusion, this looms larger than ever. Vesemir is tricked into killing Ileana, and when he realizes this, he's overwhelmed. They spend her final moments together in Dreamland, in a place they spoke of together long ago as she passes. It's almost his final moment as well, because he returns from his reverie to find that Tetra is moments away from ending his life, but a mortally wounded Deglin saves him by killing her first. Kitsu lives on with fate unknown, while Vesemir is left with a ruined Kaer Morhen and only 4 Witcher trainees, including Geralt. Despite everything, Deglin's wish is a decent one. Someone want to read that?
Oh my. Kyle, you take this one.
It's the hard accent to do, isn't it?
Now, your boy's now young, fella. Make him Witchers. Make him something more.
Yeah. Nice.
Well done.
Thanks.
Thank you. Usually you're the one who does the great voices.
Yeah, that was a good voice,
I was like, no, oh my God, Michal, save me.
So really, we could have called that Nightmare of the Wolf School, or At the Wolf School, or Nightmare, because, you know, Nightmare, and the Mar gives bad dreams. So yeah, it's a pretty tight story, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a really interesting story. I personally thought it was, you know, we kind of talked about this privately a couple of times, Aziz, just like how it's a great setup for season 2. We thought it was obviously its own great story on its own, you know, talking about Vesemir's past, but some things we're not going to be able to expand as much in the show. There's going to be so many different characters that they're introducing. There's going to be so many different important plot points. And doing this, I think, is a really great idea. You know, maybe if they do this every couple of years, I would think it would be awesome if they kind of had like one before each season or one before each other season, kind of doing this with important characters like Vesemir that are going to make a big impact on our major characters like Ciri and Geralt. He's going to be central in season 2, possibly one of the MVPs of the season we're going to see. So cool. I think it's a great choice that The Witcher chose to do this. And honestly, you know, I kind of agree with Michal. Michal's going to go into this. I could have done without, you know, all the blood and guts of the kids and stuff at the start.
Yeah.
But I thought the animation was amazing, and I thought it was really well done. Before we move forward, we do have a donation from Morley. We really appreciate that. I'm going to put that in the podcast fund. We'll put it towards our audio editing or whatever we need to improve the podcast. So thank you very much, Maura. We really appreciate
Maura.
you.
Thanks, Maura.
Yeah, Michal. What an interesting way to tell Vesemir's story in an animated short film.
Yeah, I really didn't know what to expect when I went into this, because I'm not a huge like animation watcher. Like, I feel like Avatar: The Last Airbender is kind of like my main experience. Sorry if you can hear people in my house. My main experience with like long-term animation watching. But yeah, I found it really engaging. I thought the style was beautiful and in many ways very gross.
Yeah.
It was cool. I think it was like a nice kind of way back into the world without like I guess without having to spend too long, because it's a very effectively paced story. It's like an hour and a half, if that. And also like without having to like parse through every, I love the main series, but darkly lit, frame of the original of season 1 of The Witcher. So I thought it was a really nice kind of refresher back into the world, and the characters were interesting, and it really does set you up really well for Vesemir.
They did, like, some people are saying in the chat, you know, talking about saving it closer to the season, releasing stuff closer to the season, or releasing things before season 2. This is kind of good that we had this, because we had a full 2 years before we got a second season of The Witcher. And like Aziz says, some shows, I'm not really into like The Cursed that was on Netflix, or some of these other fantasy shows they try to drop, but I'm still down for other fantasy shows to be out there and to be successful. You know what I mean? Like, I think we do need more of that. And, this first season of The Witcher was hugely successful. It actually outpaced The Mandalorian as far as like Google trending and Google views and stuff like that when I was searching it. So that's pretty crazy. So for this to kind of set up people and be like, hey, this Vesemir character, you're coming back to the season 2 of The Witcher, you're going to love this guy. They let us really kind of understand the swashbuckling, gallivanting side of Vesemir, but also kind of the selfish side of Vesemir. And we're going to see a very different character in season 2. Someone who is wise beyond his years and who has learned his lesson. That's one thing we got to kind of, I think, mention.
Yeah, it seems pretty clear there at the end that he's already kind of a changed person, or at least he started on a path to be a different person. He realized that the way he was living isn't going to cut it anymore. Not only because his home is ruined and everybody he knows is dead, but because he was living a lie before, in a sense. And I really appreciate that as far as a setup. Like, this story does a lot to connect to themes that are present in the current timeline and shows you how they could have gotten there. Like the way Vesemir is very decadent and kind of an ass. You can see, just from that, you can see why they became less popular. But then you have this much, much worse thing that they're doing to like get people killed and work against humanity that he wasn't, part of. So he's a bit heroic in fighting against that. But this shows where their reputation took such huge hits. It was already taking hits, as we see. And it makes sense. Like, why would they be all good guys? Why would they all be like Geralt? Why would they all have this code of honor that they live by? That's not very realistic for like dozens or hundreds of people to live that way. There's always going to be bad seeds, and the bad seeds will attract more attention. In fact, it sets up why Geralt has this code. Things like that. He's like, because this is what happens when you don't have a code. Stuff like Deglin and the way Vesemir used to be, and maybe Vesemir even imparted some of that because he lived through it. So, yeah, it's pretty rich with that. And like you said, it doesn't spend a lot of time setting these things up because they're already there. They're already part of the world. You're just kind of tapping into themes that we've already addressed in the past. So it just hits the ground running that way. I appreciate that.
One thing that we're going to talk about is, Vesemir was also a child of surprise. So that's something that's interesting, right? Like, a lot of commonalities with Geralt. We see all of these parallels throughout the series that are connected through the word destiny, right? Like, things happening, like Vesemir killing his true love, essentially. Things like him, he could have lived a beautiful life with her, you know what I mean? But he chose greed and money, and obviously there's consequences to his decisions, and that's a lot of what Sapkowski likes to kind of harp on is the decisions you make are very important. You can't just not make decisions. And we see that at the end of season 1, Geralt's got a very big decision to make to take care of Ciri. So I think that, they're planting quite a few seeds with the Nightmare of the Wolf. And that's what I really liked about it.
Yeah, there's a lot of karma, I think, in there. Like, there's a lot of like real world karma. The way you treat children is the way the world becomes later, right? You have everyone here in this story was treated badly as a child. It's even sort of implied that Deglin would have been treated. I mean, he was a Witcher. Of course he was treated badly. He was made into a Witcher. Of course, there's no way around that. He was given the trial of grasses and all that. So of course he was treated badly. So Tetra done violent, Witcher evil in her past. Vesemir, we talked about him. You've got Ileana. She's the only one that didn't have some evil witcher in her youth that, affected her, but she still had violence in her upbringing that affected her life. So, and Kitsu, of course, is the double extension of that. The Witchers become this, and they in turn make new creations that are these abominations of ethics, and then the abomination itself goes on and creates more abominations. It's extremely like karmic in that sense. So I kind of I appreciate that a lot too. Very on theme.
And Phil Evangel, I think, plays into that also. Like I was really surprised to see him here, but it was a really nice connection. And I thought it was really interesting the way he kind of like is in the same position that we see him, 70, 80, 90 years later. But like maybe probably like slightly better off because things haven't degraded quite to the point that they have when Geralt meets him. But like to have that like pin in the timeline that we know that this person is in this place and dealing with these issues and that it's only going to get worse was a really kind of poignant like illustration of that point, I think.
One thing that's also interesting that we should mention is Tom Canton, who plays Phil Evangel in the show, definitely going to be playing a bigger role in season 2. We're going to see a lot more of the elves. He actually voiced Phil Evangel in The Nightmare of the Wolf, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah, nice.
An opportunity to expand on his character and have a familiar voice. So if anybody didn't know that, that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
I kind of thought he was a mini MVP for me, honestly. Like I really kind of dug Phil Evangel in this story. I don't know why.
I really love that scene with him and Vesemir. It was a very raw, honest scene. Phil Evangel was like, "Listen, this is how things are." You know what I mean? He's trying to be honest with him, and then Vesemir just completely is like, "Fuck you," basically. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he's the most good person, I think, and all that. Yeah, like he was the one person that's like, think of the children, but he wasn't just think of it. He was actively trying to do something about it. He wasn't just like that Simpsons woman yelling about it,
And that's one interesting too that you mentioned, Michal. Time changes people. Like, Vesemir's been around for a long time. We saw Geralt talk about, he's like, I'm old, man. I saw a lot of what's happened on the continent. This has affected me, and we're going to see a lot of the same thing from Vesemir and Phil Evangel in season 2. And you talked about Phil Evangel's position. I mean, look, he almost killed Geralt and Jaskier. Right? Like, we saw how far he came from that situation where he was very much, well, at least he looked happier in Nightmare of the Wolf. Well, we're going to see an even more intense version of that expanded through the elves in season 2, because we know that Nilfgaard's a thing. They're encroaching and increasing their power, and all of these other things are happening around the continent. And we know that the numbers of the elves are not necessarily as large as they once were, and that's an issue. We see the xenophobia and the racism kind of permeate throughout the continent. So those are kind of, you can, getting a little bit of a flashback into the past is great, because you can see, well, Phil Evangel, he was kind of like a nice guy, but now he isn't. Well, something affected him, and through years of unfortunate events, that's just changed his view of the world.
Yeah. I also think that he's one reason, and Vesemir is another, why this will be a really effective viewing experience. Like, even if people don't watch it now, because I don't know how many people are going to be like, "Ooh, cool, Witcher animated movie," like characters I don't know, like at this point. But I feel like after season 2, people will be much more interested in watching this, and I think it'll be a really effective kind of tone setting for what they've already seen in season 2, assuming, I mean, I don't know, maybe there's nothing about this in season 2, but it seems like there will be.
Yeah, I think you're right about that, and people will be more curious about like this character that they're introduced to. That's a great point,
especially Vesemir, because we're going to see him interact with Ciri a lot. And without spoiling too much, he is quite good to Ciri. Like, you can tell he genuinely cares for her.
Yeah, he is a very he's not the same man.
It's a very stark contrast from Vesemir when he was really young and gallivanting, and I use the word gallivanting just because I hate Euron from Game of Thrones TV show so much. It just triggers everyone. But anyways, you make some really great points, Michal. I think it's going to be, and after season 2, we can go back to this conversation and be like, you can kind of gain some insight. Like, we're going to see even more of that progression of, we're going to see some really big decisions happen from these characters, and you're going to see, well, okay, that's why they're making these, like, their views of the world. We're going to understand why they make the decisions that they made.
Yeah, I think it's going to expand a lot on it. I'm definitely looking forward to hearing dialogue or seeing things happen in season 2 that touched back to this, things that we saw here, and beyond that as well. I'm sure there'll be Easter eggs in season 3 for whatever back that refer to this, and I'm sure there'll be more lines drawn. It's pretty cool. One thing I also really like is the way they tap into some real problems that exist in the world. Like Deglin is a great example of someone who has way too much institutional loyalty. He's loyal to Witchers, not people, right? He's loyal to what he is, and people like him. And if they're not, before they become a Witcher, the kids, doesn't have much compassion for them, which maybe that's a defense mechanism. You don't want to get attached to kids are going to die. Like it's rough, but I kind of get that. Not that I'm trying to humanize him, but this guy's maybe a long time ago when he was a young man, he wasn't so bad, right? That's kind of what I'm getting at. I don't know how old Deglin is, but he's probably corrupted long ago. He may not have been corrupt from the beginning. Maybe he was. We do have that sort of thing exists in the world of The Witcher. We have the School of the Cat, for example, has a bad reputation for the types of students it produced. It's barely in the books, but it is in there. And in the real world, whenever you have a culture that has a whole warrior class with no one to fight, they start picking fights or doing other things. It's bad. And this
especially
is really
when they have to kill
that.
monsters to earn money, and towns aren't, like giving out the doula.
It's very much like the police working with the mafia, or the FBI, CIA working with terrorists, or something like that. It's the same exact concept, but in a fantasy setting.
Yeah, and it's also an interesting, like, I felt very much that it was kind of, I'm glad you used the word institution, because I think Deglin has, like, institutional compassion in a way. Like, he is, everything he's doing, and, like, the argument makes perfect sense to him about doing this horrible stuff to create more monsters, because otherwise Witchers won't survive. But on an individual level, he is, and he passes it on to Vesemir, like that callousness, like when they're talking about, like, oh, which kids are gonna die, which kids aren't gonna die, and like it, and you come, I believe that scene comes like right after Vesemir has kind of become a Witcher and like has been crying about the friends that he lost, and it really shows how like corrosive that kind of institution can be when it exists, I guess, solely for its own perpetuation.
For money, too. For money as well, because if we look at it, we talked about kind of a code of honor. You mentioned this, Aziz, as a code of honor. This is something that's going to be a giant thread until the end, until we get to the end of the story of The Witcher. Okay.
Yeah.
And it's specifically going to be a lot through the story of Geralt, because he's constantly tussling with that. That's something that he's always kind of internalizing. Am I making the right decisions? Am I doing what's right? But also to another extent, Vesemir too, because he's going to be a great storyteller for the viewers. He's a great example of like, hey, listen, when I was young, I made these kind of decisions. You probably shouldn't do that because I screwed up a lot. But you do learn through failure, which is a good thing, right? Sometimes a lot of people die, and that's what we see in this scenario from Dead and other people.
Yeah, it's some really good takes there. He knows what they've all been through, and he's like, yeah, well, we have a right to survive like any other subspecies or whatever he considers themselves, a class of being, which is what Kitsu's doing. She's just trying to make more like her so she can be somewhat, have people like her that exist. It's very normal. You want your species to proliferate. And it's like, we see this in The Witcher with like the dryads. They have sort of parasitic ways of breeding, right? Like they have to steal human children to breed. It's quite a recurring theme that pops up in so many places. It's really clearly something Sapkowski thinks about a lot, is how our own society just grinds children up and changes them into something else, and not always something more, right? And it's just it's really powerful to think about like that, how all these things, it all comes back to that. And how even someone like Tetra, she's just with her hatred of the Witchers, but she's not portrayed as even remotely good. She just happens to be right about someone else's evil, but she's also evil, right? It's just all these just very evil institutions that are colliding over the issue of survival. They can't exist They can't survive without doing evil things, and someone's, they're all coming into conflict with each other.
It often has to do with
pretty
power
neat.
as well, because that permeates. We see a little bit with Stregobor, and we're going to learn a lot more of kind of their kind of inner workings and machinations and what kind of they want to do with Ciri. And then we have the story of Ciri, which is, I want to say, the main plot of the show, like why she is being hunted and chased. She is very special for a reason. We're going to find a lot more out about that. And apparently they're pushing some of the stuff up we might have not seen in some later seasons into season 2. So just, I'm not going to spoil it for you guys, but I actually think that's really exciting. To be quite honest. So it's like this idea of acquiring children for power and using them. I mean, and look at Tisea as well. She uses Yennefer, and Yennefer saves them at the Battle of Sodden. Without Yennefer, they're toast. So there's all sorts of different kind of levels of this happening in each kind of POV in The Witcher.
Yeah, I kind of, it is an interesting comparison to the mages, because they are such a strong institutional power. Even, I mean, they're a stronger power than the Witchers. I think we can surmise at this point in the story, but there's no comparison in our modern day with Geralt. Like, it's the Witchers are barely have a society that they can cling to, and they're just like a handful of them. And I kind of I kept thinking of the Jedi actually, in that, like, it is sort of a military or military force that, like, when you watch the original Star Wars, it's like such a tragedy that, like, all these people were wiped out, and that fact of it remains a tragedy when you see the prequels. But, like, there definitely is an idea that, like, these people were too powerful, and, like, they existed in a really, like, they could and did swing the fate of a galaxy on their whim, and basically everyone was reliant on hoping that they had the right intentions. And so I think it's interesting, because part of what is so, I think, sad and melancholy about Witcherness is that they are lonely, and they are few and very singular. But when we've seen at least a glimpse of what it can be like when they're not that singular and they are more institutionally powerful, like, that's not a great thing either. So
right.
Well,
Right.
Yeah,
look at what happened
it really
with
makes
Darth
you
Vader.
think.
Well, look what happened with Anakin Skywalker, right? And we saw, and I know a lot of people don't like The Last Jedi, but I particularly love the scene where Luke Skywalker is talking about, this life force belongs to everyone and not just the Jedi. There is some sort of selfishness in that, you know what I mean? And we do see a sense of selfishness when it comes to this institution of the Witchers. That is something that is definitely on display in The Nightmare of the Wolf.
Yeah, like Vesemir doesn't care about saving humanity from monsters. He cares about getting rich. Like, that's, and it's not like, he wasn't taught otherwise necessarily, but he wasn't taught some sort of nobility, like wherever Geralt got that, which may be from Vesemir, who learned the hard way. But yeah, I mean, there's this quote from Deglin it's hard to disagree with him. I mean, you can disagree with his actions easily, but this take, the only thing keeping men from hunting us are the scarier beasts we keep away. I mean, that is very reflective of a lot of things Geralt has said, and how something is changing, and when the world doesn't need Witchers, they can just cast them aside. He's not needed anymore, and that makes him an outcast, and he can see that coming. And because he's semi-immortal, he can see himself living through it, and it gives him this fatalism, like, it'd be better if I died in the line of duty. But even that is thankless, and yeah, it's pretty sad.
Yeah, I think what this movie really did nail was the bittersweetness, because I think that can get lost sometimes in, like, the snarkiness and the fights and all that. But certainly from the books, and I think that the first season honored this as well, like the real feeling of, like, there is what that is worth holding on to, but it's going to come at a very great cost, and you're not going to be able to hold on to it forever. And, like, I think that was very well illustrated in this movie.
Right on.
I love the conversation going on in chat as well. Thank you everyone for joining us on this Saturday. It's really great to be back with Michal and Aziz. Like I said, we haven't had too many of these because of everything that's going on, but obviously, this is one of the things that have kept me sane during the pandemic. So I'm so happy to be back discussing this, and it's like, as he says, a really bright future. for The Witcher and all of us Witcher fans. So much more to talk about.
Dark future for the Witchers, bright future for the
I have another real world comparison I want to make here, which is what happens when long, powerful institutions break down and the effect they have on society when they're no longer contained. Like, for example, when the Soviet Union fell, there was a huge amount of military weaponry that was no longer accounted for. People weren't keeping track of it. That's where like this whole that guy, the Nicolas Cage movie was based on the Lord of War guy. He's rooted in a real person, and that a good example. Victor Blum. He just got a hold of a lot of this military equipment no one was keeping track of anymore, and just started selling it to like terrorists and military groups that are pretty sketchy. And that's what you have here. You have Witchers who are extremely powerful. They're given this immense power to do violence. They're told to use it against monsters. They're trained to use it against monsters, but they obviously could easily use it against people. The only thing stopping them is their personality, their own sense of justice, or their own sense of maybe someone's going to kill me if I do that. But here you have Deglin talking about, well, if you this past year, 12 Witchers quit to become, I don't know, bandits or mercenaries. He says he's not clear on which, but some of both. So you have these really extremely well-trained killers who have, it's kind of the same thing. You've got these institutional weapons that are now just out there. They're not contained. They're not controlled by a state anymore. They're controlled by just rogue actors or individuals. And that's a big problem.
We see a similar situation. What happened with Vesemir and Geralt, like Geralt and the Lesser Evil. We see, kind of some conflict go down and people die. Like, you don't want to cross a Witcher, man. They're basically have superhuman strength. Like, they'll kill you. You know what I mean? But we do see some people, we do see the kind of judgment out there, of some of the, it's not necessarily right, it's not necessarily wrong, but there are some Witchers who can be perceived as, I don't want to say evil, but not as good. And that's why some of these people want to start bar fights or, kind of judge them in public and want to be more stoic about it and be like, oh, we don't need you in our society. So there is this kind of like double-edged sword with it. Like, Witchers can be very helpful, but they also be they're so powerful, they can definitely influence in a bad way. You know what I mean? Because of we see greed with Vesemir in his younger years.
Yeah, and I felt actually that this really kind of clarified that for me, because one of the questions I had both in the show and reading the books is like the amount and virulence of the real hatred that Witchers face never kind of made a ton of sense to me, because I'm like, do you guys want to be swallowed by Leshy or not? Like, I'm like, like, you have them for a reason. It didn't really add up to me that people would hate their exterminators so much. But I think this definitely clarified it, in that the Witchers kind of were like a sword without a hilt. Like, hope you kind of had to hope, especially as like a peasant, that they swung in the right direction, and did get the monster as opposed to getting you with the power that they had. And yeah, I appreciate that a lot, actually, about this.
Well, and then we see like, in the season 1 of The Witcher, the story gets flipped on its head a little bit. We see the idea of Witchers not getting involved in politics, and Geralt, having the ability to have influence and power and help certain situations, and not necessarily making a decision is actually worse than making a decision. So it's like, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. You know what I mean? It's like you're kind of screwed other way on the continent. You know what I mean?
It's very much, I was going to say, that's a great segue to talk about how this connects to the Lesser Evil a bit, because that is like, in that story, Geralt's like, no, I don't kill people. I won't kill people because for all I know, I've been tricked into it. I've been tricked into killing a person that doesn't deserve it. So I just won't do it at all, unless they're coming at me. And, obviously there's been exceptions, but that's his argument when Stregobor's like, no, she's not even really a person. She is a monster. Look at her. It's Black Sun, blah, blah, blah.
I can show you the autopsies.
Yeah, exactly. So
I'm gonna have to get out my board of people who suck.
Yeah, Stregobor of people who suck. He's right on there. And so, like that story by Tetra, where she says her mother was killed by a Witcher who lied about she laid a curse on someone. It's like, well, that's the same thing, basically. So that's why Geralt's like, no, look, I won't kill people. No one's ever going to trick me into killing someone that way if I just refuse. But then we see what you were talking about, Kyle. Well, is being neutral isn't always the right play. Like when great evil's being done, maybe you should kill a few people, the evil ones, just don't get worked up over who's, don't get tricked into these edge cases where it's not clear. But like, sometimes it's quite clear who the bad guys are. You don't always have this gray area to be like, I don't know.
This is why the story of The Witcher is so amazing, because there's this web of connection that hasn't been fully laid out for us yet. And we're going to see this over seasons. We obviously see Stregobor wanting Renfri, and that's a connection to people wanting Ciri. And that's a connection to Geralt being indecisive and also making a decision to protect Renfri, and Stregobor's want, and like all of these things connect. And it's all this big cycle of things that have been going over and over and over and over again. The cycle of repetition that needs to essentially end, right? And that's one of the big themes. I don't want to spoil too much, but it's going to be explored, and it's going to be awesome because there is a sort of conclusion to it. I would say at the end of the story of The Witcher, or a close.
Depends how you read it, but
yeah, depends how you read it.
Yeah, well, I'd say it's an interesting thing about the way Sapkowski writes is there he does a lot of interesting, quirky, maybe even wandering things with the narrative, but theme wise, he keeps it pretty tight as far as the main like core themes. Most everything you can relate to a handful of important themes that are kind of or sub themes of that, like the children's stuff, the power themes, things we've talked about before. I don't need to go list them all, but you know what I mean.
That's why I think, the decision that they made, to have the three POVs, the Ciri, the Yennefer, and the Geralt, the way to tell that story. I don't want to compare it to Game of Thrones, but having those episodes where we have a thread, a certain common theme and thread throughout an episode, or a few episodes that connect to all of the different characters. That's such a great way to tell a story, and Sapkowski is so good at that, keeping that type, threading those themes through all of the different characters and connecting that through his mythology. It's just so amazing how he does that.
Yeah,
and that's why this Nightmare of the Wolf is so good too, because he's expanding on that. It's expanding on that.
Yeah, I like that idea about kind of talking about kids also, because it really stuck out to me that we have Geralt at the end, and like we have Ilyana making this very deliberate play to save the baby witchers, and at the expense of her own life, it turns out, and like that's an unambiguously good thing, right? Like we're saving innocent children, but the fact is, like, they're gonna go through the trial of the grasses, and they're gonna go through the changes, and not all of some of them are gonna die anyway, probably more horribly than if a peasant had like hacked their head off. And like we know that Geralt like has some really great things in his life, and we also know that he is tormented in a lot of different ways for his position and his ambiguity in the world. And like and some of that suffering is going to be visited on the kids by society, and some of it's going to be visited on them presumably by Vesemir. And like it is a really complicated like thought that Vesemir doesn't want to perpetuate the system in the exact way, but he does and will perpetuate the system more or less in the same way. And I feel like the ending didn't really leave me knowing how to feel, because I'm like, I'm not cheering for these little kids to become witchers, And, like I'm glad that they're cute and alive, but
I think that's important though, Michal, because that will be clarified when we do see Vesemir and how he's going to talk about his past. Like that's something that's so important to learning who Vesemir is in the present when we see him in season 2. And I think that is really important when we do, they kind of like, hey, I was feeling the same way. Like I'm always rooting for Geralt because I believe he has a good heart. You know what I mean? I believe he's a genuinely good person and he wants to do well. But there's definitely that dark history there that you have to think about. Well, should this even still be a thing anymore? Because that was pretty like that's like as bad as it gets. You know what I mean? Like this is like summoning evil into the world, essentially, like devils, like Satan type shit. So
and we're gonna see the same thing with Ciri, right? Like I mean, on the one hand, it actually makes a lot of sense for her to be kind of the agent of like, I don't know about change, but like definitely a real shock to the Witcher system when this girl shows up. But like I think also, we do have that same kind of existential question with her, with the power she's vested with the things that have been done to create her as she is, and the choices that she has to make. And it it's a very complicated, uncomfortable thing. Like, every time I think about this, I'm like, the answer is there's no answer. How nice.
Also wanted to point to this bit about a couple, or rather not this bit, about a couple of connections here to the future. Like we talked about some of the details that are left over afterwards, some things that are certainly going to become clearer later when more connections are made, but just some small ones like the destruction outside Kaer Morhen. A lot of this, they took a few steps to connect a few dots there. Like apparently there's some griffin bones that are there that we'll see, or you can see them in the trailer even, that we'll be seeing more clearly, I suppose, that came from the end of the climax here. And that's pretty cool. Appreciate details like that. It's fun to have Easter eggs. There were quite a few.
We spoke a little bit about that in our trailer breakdown, in case anyone wants to go watch that. It doesn't have Michal in it, which makes it a little bit less rich, of course, because we always like her insight. But it was fun.
An awesome job with that.
we went like 90 minutes. It was crazy. We just talked about Vesemir for an hour. But
it's fine. Yeah. I listened to at least 2 podcasts where people talked about the Spider-Man trailer for like 2 hours.
Wow. Okay.
Just one trailer.
And it's not that. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Okay. Some other random, I was going to make a few other connections. My favorite 2 like moments for visuals, I think, that were in the montage when he's fighting the werewolf and they jump like over the town, and it's just like he's kind of flying over the moon. That was so cool. I just like that because it's very much like, I'm like you, Michal. I don't have a lot of experience watching anime, but one thing I recognize with anime is it's action, over the top action is a thing for anime. That's just how it is, which is making an adult anime kind of makes sense to have all the gore, even if it's not everyone's favorite thing. It is at least on theme. Yeah. The other one I really liked was when Vesemir's eyes change and they had like his eyes go yellow and there's like a sun and it goes over the coin, the Witcher medallion. That was super smooth. That was really nice. I appreciate that because that's more memorable to me than the battle stuff. I do remember like the battle stuff was cool too, don't get me wrong, but the artistry is even more memorable. But the music is even more memorable.
Beautiful all around, really. The scenes with Vesemir when he was young and poking the fox, and just like it was just really beautiful altogether. For those of you who really enjoy The Nightmare of the Wolf, I also see people talking about Castlevania. If you know the original Nintendo game, Belmont, vampires, werewolves, all that. Highly recommend that. Same studio, I believe, that created the Nightmare of the Wolf. And they're very, very, very good. Something that you can go watch in the meantime while you're waiting for The Witcher. Not The Witcher, but hey, got something to watch until then. Yeah, I thought the animation was amazing. Like I said, I was like pretty shocked at the beginning. I was like, they're really okay. This is how we're starting.
There are kids being speared. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
It was so sudden too, because that opening song was beautiful. That the music, it was in like that unusual meter. That voice. That's Luke Youngblood was the singer there. If you've seen Community, he was Magnitude. So that's quite a obscure connection.
Is he on Gallivant?
I think that sounds familiar, but I don't remember for sure.
Now the word Gallivant is coming up again.
Oh, he's so good.
Brian
you guys should watch
Olivera was the composer. Gallivant. Okay, we'll have to take that recommendation. Everybody, pay attention to Michal. Check out Gallivant.
It's a very nice light viewing. So
nice. So Vesemir himself was Theo James. He was in the Underworld films, Divergent series, other stuff.
I can't believe him already. I was so like, cool, oh my god, it's the guy from Downton Abbey and Divergent who like was cool, supposed to have like this big career.
He did a great job, an amazing job.
Oh, he was great. He was actually he sounded hot and he looked hot. So
Speaking of looking hot, they had to do a bath scene just like they did with Henry Cavill. That was totally on purpose. They're like, we're going to do that again.
That's so
Every
iconic
Witcher
from the
gets a
Witcher
bath.
games, right? The Witcher game meme. Like, you should see the amount. Like, there's whole Reddits devoted to this bath.
Wow.
Scene.
So young Vesemir, as well as the voice of young Remus, was David Arago Jr., who is Ferb from Phineas and Ferb. How about that? And Remus is kind of sad because Remus is one of the 4 that survives at the end. Remus is also the one that's killed in episode 3, the same one this guy wrote by the Striga, the one that Geralt says, you didn't tell anyone it bested a Witcher. You know, when he gets mad about that when they're concealing that, because that's Remus. That's that one of those 4 kids. Whoops. So, and remember, Geralt grabs Remus's medallion in that scene. And we know he's going back to Kaer Morhen, and we know they have that tree where the medallions get hung. So
Vesemir is holding a medallion in his hand and has blood on
Yeah.
him during the trailer, so that'll be interesting.
So I guarantee, like 99% guarantee, that Geralt is going to put Remus's medallion on the tree early in season 2.
Be nice and symbolic.
Yeah.
Then we also
Sad, but appropriate.
Now we have Daglan Graham McTavish, Mr. Superstar.
Mr. cornering the fantasy market like nobody's business.
He's an
Oh my
Outlander.
gosh.
He's fantastic in that.
Okay, so yeah, let's just give him a quick rundown. Like, he's in everything, right? Like, okay, so this double time because he's going to be Dykstra. He was Dwalin in The Hobbit. You guys just brought up Castlevania. He was in that. He was Dracula, so not exactly a small role. You guys just said Outlander, and he's going to be in House of the Dragon. Like, what
Harold Westerling. It's going to be huge.
Man, like, wow. He's got the voice. There's a reason he's blowing up. So
he's going to be Dykstra. Him as Dykstra is going to be that's going to be I'm super excited for that. He's a perfect casting.
So Ilyana Zerbst was Mary McDonnell, who was in Dances with Wolves. She was perhaps most famous as Laura Roslin in Battlestar Galactica, like, the president of humanity. So that's a pretty big role. And Laura Pulver was Tetra Gilchrist. She's also was in the Underworld stuff, and she was in the Game of Thrones Telltale games as Lady Alyssa Forrester. I suppose we could say she's the least established, but she's probably the youngest of these actors. True, that's obviously not throwing shade. She's just getting started, and she seems to have done a great job. I thought her voice was excellent and strong, and had a lot of sort of contained rage to it, which was appropriate.
She was one of the MVPs. She did one of the best jobs for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's that disdain that I think a lot of the mages have. That
she
really nailed.
Like, she talked about how she's like, yes, I descend from the first mages in the world, the first mages ever, which is that only sounds a little bit haughty. But also interesting that she brings up that her mother was a sorceress. So we have a second exception. It's rare, but clearly not unheard of, because Geralt's own mother is another exception of a sorceress having children. So that is unusual, but noteworthy. Yes.
And just to answer your question, Liat in chat, who's going to be in House of the Dragon? Graham McTavish.
Yeah.
Who
is he going to be? He's going to be Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, Harold Westerling. Before Kristen Cole, obviously. Or maybe not obviously if you don't know. But anyway, before Kristen Cole. So let's talk about Kitsu for a minute, because she's kind of an interesting character. Obviously very tragic. She survives, which is interesting. You kind of wonder if there's ever going to be any follow-up on her. They have that open. If they want to do more with her, they could. The name origin is cool because it comes from Kitsune, which is a fox. And it's what's its name? Bodemeo was specifically cited the Aguara in A Season of Storms for the inspiration for Kitsune, or for Kitsune. So that's pretty cool. We've seen foxes before. We had that extended bit about
they're very prevalent in anime too.
Yeah,
Japanese and Asian culture.
Yeah, was it Raymond the fox we talked about before?
Reynard. Yeah.
Reynard. Yeah, I'm like, Raymond, that's not right. Yeah, Reynard the fox. Yeah, so that just keeps it's another kind of recurring important symbolic animal here for fairy tales and a lot of myth cycles. So that's pretty cool. Very dark, sad, but interesting, well fleshed out and set up.
Kitsune in mythology often possess magical abilities, which we see.
Mm-hmm. We sure
I thought it was interesting. Sorry, the way she was animated, like in her elf form, she was just kind of gross. And then like when she was a fox, she had a lot of dignity. I felt like there was a lot of like
Yeah.
mystery to her, and I thought that was a really interesting like reflection of maybe what she had been before or something.
Yeah, that's a good point. I have only one thing for the herb lore today, but it's
I'm so glad
it's
you found
fun.
one.
I did. I was like, well, hopefully blue gum is a real thing, because that was the only one. And it is. It's a type of eucalyptus, and the oil it produces is used IRL for as a biopesticide and antimicrobial, which is it's kind of on point, right? They're trying to expunge a evil spirit with it. So that's kind of cool. Eucalyptics, go eucalyptus. It's native to Southern Australia, but it grows elsewhere. People have planted it all over the world. So
I use eucalyptus in my sauna.
Oh, nice.
Mm.
And also very fun if we talk about the creatures. I'd made the joke Nightmare of the wolf at the beginning, and well, the phrase mar does originate from the term mare, M-A-R-E, which is where the term nightmare comes from. It's an ancient term in folklore from it's Old Dutch or Proto-Slavic or High German or Old Norse and Swedish. There's various forms like mar or maria or mara, just things like that. So similar, and it's about it's the origin of the word isn't clear because it's super, super old. And the mare was believed to ride horses. So it all fits, mare, Mara. Yeah, it's pretty neat. So there you go. It's once again, the Witcher lore is absolutely worth digging into, because
It doesn't in
cool
Mara
like
in Hebrew mean bitter, if I'm not mistaken.
It does.
Oh,
does.
nice.
That's would
cool.
be, yeah, MR or MAR would be bitter. Yeah.
So kind of
Nice.
like an unsettled spirit, something that's, I don't know. That's kind of the vibe that I got. Nightmare,
Yeah.
unsettling spirit. Yeah.
So there's a common name, or not common, but a name Zamora, either Z-M-O-R-A or Zamora. Like, for example, there's a baseball player named Daniel Zamora, and that is Polish for demon / goddess of winter, according to Wikipedia. It's kind of cool. But yeah,
well, actually, speaking of like the Polish influence, the music I thought was I mean, obviously I'm not in any way an expert, but particularly like the battle music, I thought was really it evoked that kind of Slavic feel to me, and I thought it was really unique and really, really great.
The music in the soundtrack in The Witcher 3 is particular. It's like one of the best soundtracks for a game ever. And I'm not sure if they use the same composers, but it reminded me. I felt like I was in The Witcher 3 again playing the game. I was like,
nice.
Oh my god! Like when you walk into a town, each town kind of has its own song, and it felt like I was walking into those towns again. I was like, oh my god, this feels so great and comfortable. I know this. Like the similar kind of like darky, like dark, flowy, kind of like almost gypsy-like kind of tunes. Oh, I love that. Kay Pertinsky likes it. She knows what's up.
Yeah, it seems like most people in the chat are saying they like the music and animation style too. It's neat that the mare is attested, according to Wikipedia, as early as the 13th century in the Ynglinga saga from the Norse. So that's cool. So that's pretty neat. Goes back a long way. I love stuff like that where they don't actually know how far back it goes, because dreams, nightmares, things like that are older than writing. The concepts, that humans have been having nightmares since before we were writing things down. So yeah, the concept had to exist before. So that's really cool. It gives it that real sense of ancient to it, and something that we have in common with ancient humankind as well. We've
all had a nightmare before, have we not?
I haven't, but I'm weird.
Me, nightmare? No, never.
Well, you guys are lucky, man. I've had a ton.
So the other creature that's important here is the Leshen, the Leshy. In sometimes it's called a Spriggan. It's cool. In Russian, it literally translates as "from the forest." All right, there you go. There's another translation, though, that is objectionable to anyone who's read the full series, because one of the translations of Leshen is "forest grandfather." Ooh, remember Forrest Gramps?
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah, so let's not talk about Forrest Gramps. So there's also the other translations are like similar, like Forest Uncle, Forest Master, Forest Man, Forest Spirit, Righteous One of the Forest, Honorable One of the Forest, etc. They're like a guardian spirit, so each Leshen protects a particular forest. They live in it and protect it. So it's kind of got that dryad feel to it, but more masculine. Whereas the dryads are very feminine, obviously. Leshen are in historical in a myth perspective, obviously, are sometimes portrayed as married to Kikimora. So there's the Kikimora coming back again. And also Leshen are associated in myth with the abduction of children. But here's the one that really gets me is they're also associated with families giving unwanted children away to Leshen. Ooh. So that's super on theme, giving
Sacrifice
away
to the forest.
yeah, giving away kids to the Witchers or giving away kids to experiment on them, the elven children, whatever. It's like, whoa, that's really fits too well. And of course, they are sometimes friendly to people who show respect to the forest, but of course, this Leshen wasn't a typical Leshen. And I know we see one in the trailer for season 2, so we're going to see that's going to be the first time we actually see one, though, because it's talked about a lot. Like the name comes up a bunch of times in the books, but I don't think we ever see one, right? Unless I'm remembering wrong. But they're definitely in like the RPG because, of course, it's a cool monster to have for like a computer.
And they're
game
incredibly hard to kill. It's insane. They just
seems like they would be.
By the way, it looks absolutely amazing in the trailer. I think we'll probably talk about that at some point because it's coming up soon. But I mean, the VFX team for The Mandalorian is what the Witcher is using now. They got that money, and you can clearly see it's upgraded. I'm just saying in the trailer. If you haven't seen the upgrade, then watch the trailer again because it looks amazing.
Yeah, it does.
Very reason to be very excited for season 2, I think. Because we also see vampires in the trailer. Woo-hoo.
It's good. I'm so excited. Yeah, they clearly have such a larger budget and they're using it wisely. And this is a story that fits well because you're trying to do like, that stuff doesn't make a story, but when you have to include it, it can take away from the story if it's not done well. So you got to have that stuff be tight.
Like some people were complaining about Villain Trendemirth.
Yeah, it wasn't great. Like I get it.
It reminded me of Sinbad,
but...
like Sinbad that I used to watch in the 90s, kind of. You know what I mean?
Whatever that flying thing was in the season 2 trailer looked badass, though. So I definitely am confident for. How about Tetra's and Vesemir's quick brief comments on fire magic and how it's banned? And Tetra's like, well, those people don't know what they're doing. That's why you don't use fire magic because they're all idiots. But I know how to use fire magic.
That I felt was like a very strong plant for later.
For later,
yeah.
Maybe we'll just call it that. Just later. We'll hold
off
on
also being a type of magic that the Witchers use. There's Ard, Igni.
Yeah.
So all of that kind of maybe we'll see some more of that. I think the possibility of seeing more of that in the TV version of the show.
Yep. So fun moment. That baby bald-headed Geralt was voiced by Lauren Hissrich's son, Harry. That was a little Harry Hissrich. That's cool. And I don't know if this was intentional, but you kind of have 4 main characters plus Vesemir, and then the story ends with 4 Witcher kids and Vesemir. So it's kind of like that's probably just a coincidence. The number 4 is small enough that there's lots of things that have 4 in them. So, but the King of Cadwin is Calanthe's great grandfather, so Ciri's great grandfather. So that's kind of neat. And Sabrina. Yeah, not a great king. I liked your note on him. Just like another terrible leader on display here.
Yeah, there are certain things that are eternal in the Witcher universe, and bad leaders who let people rule for them because it's more convenient and just enjoy the aesthetic pleasures of their rule. I mean, I even thought he was drawn like almost more cartoonish than everybody else. It was not a flattering portrayal.
There's really it communicates so much when you're the king and you're sitting there looking at a mirror, like while at court, like you're staring at yourself while everyone that communicates an awful lot about your attitude. Like, yes, I'm only concerned with my look while everyone's looking at me. I'm already the center of attention, but I'm just gonna groom myself. Sabrina Glesevig is from Ard Carre. Very small Easter egg there. So I don't know that relates to anything, but she might have been alive already by this point. But in the show, probably not, because in the show she's portrayed as the same age as Yennefer. So this would have been pretty close in the timeline. I guess this would have happened pretty soon before that, but close. Not important, but fun.
Then we have the great quote, "It is not a question of price."
Yeah, that was great. That one stood out.
Really stood out, right?
Especially if you have the subtitles on, it's just like printed right there in front of you, like, oh, there it is. So yeah, that was great.
Yeah, and I love that Declan ends with "make them something more," and it really ties beautifully into the concept of that as being something that, like, children completing you, and having that responsibility to raise them in a better way than you were raised.
Those particular
made me feel things.
Yeah,
and mostly Declan just made me feel angry. So
yeah, it's good. Like it's a very good use of even bad guys can have good moments, and yeah, that was a really good. Like, he died well,
Yeah.
He died very well, and yeah, that was a great line, because especially because it's that line, it's something more. It's not just any of the titles. Like with Question of Price, that was kind of clever, right? That was like, but this one was like, ooh, that hits hard, because Something More is the last short story. It's the one that the last one we podcasted on as far as the short stories, and we kind of universally agreed it was maybe the most powerful, maybe at least not, if not the most on theme for the rest of the series. It's perhaps the most powerful, the most
well, we hear
in a lot
Geralt
of
say
ways.
to
So,
Ciri in the trailer, when Ciri says, "Am I your destiny, girl?" He says, "You're much more than that. You're something more than that." You know what I mean? Like, you
yes.
say that you're my destiny. No, you have your own life. You're more meaningful than just a possession to me.
And that makes me feel really good that even the side, like, if you want to call this a side project, like it's part of the canon, it's a main thing, but you can call it a side project from the main show if you want. You can call it a side project from the books if you want to. But my point with that, framing it that way, is that this was made by someone else, right? Like, but yeah, Beau DeMayo wrote one of the episodes for the show, but it's someone else is creating it and writing it. But they clearly took effort to keep these core values part of it, like something more and these other like important themes that we keep coming back to. So that's really important. For when you have a fandom or a world that's being expanded on a lot, you have it being taken in a lot of directions, so many productions, animated films, prequels, you risk losing some of that core feel. Projects like Star Wars keep some of that feel by just keeping that aesthetic, which is better than nothing. And I'm not complaining about Star Wars. I'm just saying there's various ways to do that. And so far, the expansion of the Witcherverse is going well in terms of keeping that core. So I hope that continues.
And like, just to highlight again, Beau DeMayo, the episodes he helped co-produce, The End's Beginning and Much More, which are the two short stories we were kind of talking about the most here, I think, as far as influence goes.
Sounds like he may have established himself as someone who really gets it more than most.
I think so.
I had one funny line I picked out that I thought was really good. It's just right from the beginning. There's a lot of snarky lines, but this one was particularly stood out. It's like setting Vesemir up. Forest hobo or deadly flapping swarm? Let's pick a look and go with it. Deadly flapping swarm it is.
Now, there was a lot of great, like, well-placed sarcasm and kind of. I thought Theo James did a really good job with Vesemir. Just his tone with everything, his snarkiness, his overconfidence was just absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, same.
Production-wise, it was just very strong all around. You're right. Yeah.
I did feel that it. I mean, I'm totally assuming here, but I felt like everyone was definitely recording, like, in their closets. And, like, I don't know that like some of the performances I thought were like a strong baseline, but there were parts of it that I was like, I feel like I could hear something banging against the mic, or or like whatever. But like, what are you gonna do in COVID? It's obviously a very very difficult thing to.
A small clip
I
for
had
an
the
otherwise
same.
good adaptation. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I had the same issue with What If, where it just seemed very clear to me that everybody was recording kind of in an isolation and not really acting off each other. But again, yeah. What are you going to do? It's a pandemic.
Yeah.
The
There
good
are
thing about
signs
the-
of, yeah, a lot of shows have signs like that. For example, I don't know if anyone saw the show White Lotus. The studio is basically like, we need a show that's in a single out of the way location. They're like, how about a luxury hotel in Hawaii? They're like, good idea. And so
I have
there
heard
you
such
go.
crazy things about that show. I think that's one I might just leave on the shelf.
It's pretty entertaining. It's a small commitment. It's only 6 half-hour episodes, but yeah, you're not like, you're definitely not missing some huge cultural statement. But it's
we're getting
entertaining.
another one of these animated movies next year, I believe.
Yeah.
And Diego mentioned an awesome character in chat who I think would be perfect for it. Regis.
Who's that?
I think Regis would be a great character.
Ooh, yes, that
to
would
have
be
some
amazing.
backstory for an animated movie.
Yeah, we don't know anything about the plans for this other thing, do we? The second Studio Mir production. It's I couldn't find anything on it, but I didn't assume that, I have all the information.
I have a feeling that we're going to be getting one of these before each season. I'm just telling you, if they're going to be doing Witcher Blood Origin, which we're going to be getting, I believe, is 6 to 8 episodes of kind of the conjunction of spears and some of the very first Witcher they're talking about, and more of the mages and the kind of magic and the mythology of the start of kind of the Witcherverse. I keep on saying. No, but it's just a really great time to be a Witcher fan, I think. You know what I mean? Like, obviously, I had some issues with Nightmare of the Wolf, but overall, I really enjoyed it. I watched like 3 or 4 times. I watched it by myself. I watched it with my cousin who hadn't seen it, and he had a great time. Him and his wife really liked it, and they're just show watchers. They don't read the books, and they thought it was cool. They were like excited to learn about a character that they're like, oh, Vesemir, that's Geralt's mentor, right? And they were like excited to learn about a character that they had not known about, and they thought it was cool that they were gonna learn more about that in season 2. So I thought that, from my perspective, obviously, like you guys, I think I don't want to call us experts, but I think we're quite devoted to talking about and reading The Witcher. We've all done our rereads and re-listens, and we're deeply involved in our love for The Witcher. But it's so cool to kind of hear that for people that are just getting into the books and just kind of starting to devour the content of
dark story, bright future.
So yeah, a lot of really positive comments from chat too, it seems like, which is great.
Did we miss any notes? I think I as usual had plenty to say, and I think I got it all out. I don't want to make sure that I didn't skip over anything y'all had planned that we maybe missed. So before we get to any sort of outro, want to circle back and say anything?
I guess I'll do my 2-second feminism corner.
Oh yeah, you have some great notes there.
So, tap out if you're not interested. But I kind of have mixed feelings. I felt like, the 2 central female characters, not counting Kitsu, I guess, were obviously Tetra and Ilyana. And I thought they were really strong characters, and they felt fully formed, and I knew kind of what they wanted and why they wanted it. But I can't kind of get over the fact that both of them are really only there because they're connected with Vesemir, and they also both die because of Vesemir pretty directly. So yeah, it was something of a with a lot of the if you've been listening to our short story coverage, a lot of it has been kind of a mixed bag in terms of the way I feel about the female characters, and I kind of felt like this was slightly disappointingly of a piece with that, but certainly not I hate this, blah blah blah, smash axe, whatever. It's just something that I thought played in an interesting way, and I hope that they continue moving forward from here.
Yeah, I think if I could add to that, one function of the story that it tried to do, and I referred to it as very tight early on, I think that was maybe it was too tight in some ways, it was too self-contained, and that's maybe part of what you're talking about, the characters revolving around Vesemir, maybe a little too much. So maybe that's part of an extension of that. I don't know. Obviously not just an observation really. And then yeah, just the small cast, the fact that Phil Evangel was included, he was great, but he sort of felt bolted on, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
He didn't necessarily, it was maybe a little bit of a reach that he was included. I I didn't
Yeah, it's
mind.
a little bit like in Star Wars when you have a whole galaxy and you keep meeting the same people.
Yeah, it is very. Yeah, you're right. It does have that kind of feel where it's that law of conservation of characters kind of thing where they want to keep it simple, and the good way to do that is to use characters we already know. And yeah, it produces mixed results. I don't criticize it too much, but we can acknowledge it. Yeah.
I definitely felt like his lines were important though, because we will see more of him in season 2. And
That's true. Yeah, you're right. There's more to him as well. There's probably some setup there that we're not fully aware of.
Because I think, we will, for TV adaptations, there's going to be some characters that are going to get a little bit more to say. Especially hopefully from some of our Witchers, we're going to have new characters that we haven't seen before either. But all in all, I think that I give it 2 thumbs up. Nightmare of the Wolf. I enjoyed it. What about you guys?
Yeah.
2 thumbs up.
I give it 2 thumbs up. Yeah.
Nice.
Yep, enjoyed it very
looking
much.
forward
I'm
to
trying to think of a more what's a more witchery thing to give it than thumbs. 2 eyeballs dangling from sockets.
2 fried flying fish.
Yeah, 2.
There's so many eyeballs, guys. So many eyeballs.
There were a lot of eyeballs.
And then at the end, the dwarf witcher, the short person witcher who was such a badass, and then like you see, not only does he have an eyeball hanging out, but he also has a sand on just his spine. And I was like, you know what?
That was woo, damn. Yeah, that was bloody.
I'm actually really excited to see kind of your takes on season 2, Michal, because we get to introduce them to some even stronger female characters, including
I'm hyped. I really am, and I'm very excited to see Ciri kind of take her place in the story, and see how that goes. Hi, cat.
No kitty.
Emperor Xerxes is here.
Yes, he is the cutest Mew, I like to say. But I think that I'm just gonna slide this in there. I think we're all really excited for season 2. I know someone who's an extra in the season says it's going to be absolutely amazing. I can't really say too much, but and they're saying that it's just going to blow everyone away. I think too the cool thing about season 2 for everyone, and I keep on talking about this, I mentioned this a bunch, is that season 1 kind of had that timeline issue for the first 5 episodes too. Not to say that it was hard to follow. I think most people were like, oh, okay, like we're kind of witnessing the past, the present, and in different ways from different POVs. But now we're getting, with the exception of maybe the first episode, depending on how they tell it, I think they're going to change that up a little bit to make it in the present, because Ciri will be with Geralt, and I think that'll be actually really an interesting change, to be quite honest. It'll be really interesting to
a lot more linear,
yeah. But linear doesn't mean less exciting, because there's going to be a lot of betrayal, a lot of more magic, more monsters, more war, and
more politics.
Powerful,
more intrigue. That'll be a big part of it. Yeah.
Oh, shit's
and that's what I'm really.
Yeah.
Say that again, Michal?
I said shit's going down.
Oh yeah.
And then
Shit.
up, and then left and right, and all.
It's the fan.
Also, can I just say, like,
all over the place.
I watched the trailer and I was really like, all right, cool, right? And I was like, something's missing. What's missing? And then Jaskier shows up in the very end. I was like, that's what I was missing. Okay, yeah, now I'm fully on board. I'm like so excited.
You can't have all that darkness without some comic relief, yo.
Yeah, it is weird though, because I got so used to thinking, like, when I watched the show, I was like, okay, so that's Jaskier, and then I read the books and I was like, oh, it's Dandelion, and now I'm like, which are you? But
I'm just saying Jaskier now, because Jaskier actually means dandelion.
I know. I really wish they'd stuck with that translation for the book. It would have made everyone's life very much easier.
I think it's such a beautiful name, to be honest.
Yeah, it's a good name. You're right. Yeah.
It's got gusto. Jaskier. But yeah, thumbs up from all of us here, and we hope that you enjoyed this episode with us today. This is something that we had been talking about. Obviously, we got, if you enjoyed this, you can go listen to us at anchor.fm. If you just look at the little ticker up here, of course, anchor.fm, the podcast of surprise. In the title, you can see we are the podcast of surprise. How many episodes do we have now? 15 or 16? Quite a few now. We finished the first 2 books, which is really exciting. So for those of you who are maybe thinking about reading the books, you can actually dive into that, and we kind of go into each short story and kind of explain Sapkowski's fairy tale influences, because he uses a lot of those, like Snow White and Dracula and all of these different influences, the stuff that influenced him and made him excited to write. So we talk a lot about that. We talk a lot about the kingdoms and different characters, and the kind of stuff that, you know, the craft, the different things, the lore, the mythology, all of that. We talk a lot about that. We nerd out about it and we laugh about it. Always good.
We
vibes.
sure do.
So podcast is surprise. And like I said, is this one going to be going up on the pod feed as well, or are we just keeping this one on?
Yeah, I'll put it up on the pod feed, definitely. Yeah.
So yeah, just kind of just putting it out there, everyone. We are kind of behind the scenes trying to figure out what we're going to be doing going forward, because we are moving into Blood of Elves, right? So that's going to be coming soon. However, we're going to be doing a scripted Nilfgaard episode. For those of you that watch History of Westeros and you love the content you see there, we're going to have a Nilfgaard episode where we talk about the kingdom, the kind of basically everything that you want to know about Nilfgaard and the things that you need to know kind of going into season 2. And
yeah, it should help set that up. We'll have that out before season 2 drops.
And then when season 2 drops, I think we've all agreed to, we're going to be covering that. It'll be interesting to see how that goes down, because it all drops at once. So we'll probably take our time dissecting each episode, but that's cool too, because we can stretch it out a little bit and kind of, you know, keep the hype going for longer than, because last time, right, the season was over and I think we started February or the March where we all got together.
I don't recall.
It was March or April, because COVID had already hit, and
oh yeah,
I think Aziz was like, "You want to do a podcast?" And I was like, "You mean something to distract me?" Yes, I will.
And now we're all addicted. But it's going to be exciting, because we're all now together. We've established our podcast, and now there'll be a full season dropping when we have the pod, and that'll be really exciting. And I'm sure there'll be all sorts of new people coming into the community and interacting. And you know, last time The Witcher season 1 dropped, is funny because Aziz is someone that I always like. Aziz just knows more than me. He's a nerd. Okay. It's like, and it was the first time that I had read something before Aziz. So I'm like, oh my God, I feel so smart. And then he's read it like 4 times more than me now, probably. But,
once you get me going. Yeah.
But it's an exciting time because we're here together now. And now we have a season dropping. And the last time after season 1 of The Witcher dropped, the books were sold out on Amazon, all different Amazon, UK, Canada, and US. So I anticipate that will definitely be happening after season 2 as well. So yeah, cool. Exciting times, everyone. What's next for you guys?
Well, we're over at History of Westeros. We're about to do Valar Rereadus for the World of Ice and Fire starting in January, and we're working on some scripted content in the meantime, and getting ready for House of the Dragon. Next trailer, whenever that comes out, we'll be jumping on that. But yeah, good times in the fantasy fandom world, the multi-fandom world here at the end of 2021.
So much is coming up. There's Wheel of Time.
I'm excited for that. Yeah,
that's good.
I do too.
I do too. Boba Fett's coming out for us sci-fi fans at the end of December. That looks absolutely tantalizing.
Sure, we can call Star Wars sci-fi.
I call it space fantasy, which is not derogatory.
Yeah.
No,
I don't mean that as a criticism at all.
I could go all into my spiel on how things are actually categorized and how it's about what the story values and what it uses, as opposed to
like
whatever,
Dune is space fantasy too, right? Like that's
no. I actually feel like, well, I've only seen the movie, so I haven't read the book, but I felt like Dune felt very sci-fi to me, in that it was very kind of, the rules were important.
Well, it removes a lot of the science on purpose to make it simpler, but whatever. I won't quibble. Yeah, I think it's fair to call it sci-fi.
I thought it was good, but I actually thought it was like, I refer to it as mid. I didn't enjoy it as much as I thought I would. But
perhaps when it's all done, you will enjoy
the second part. I think, you know, having it 2 parts or 3 parts will definitely probably change my mind on that.
Yeah, and it's good that they got a second part, because what a disaster if it.
And I mean, it was a beautiful looking movie. It was just like, you know, on a nerd level.
You can't deny that. It was just an absolutely it was a visual feast.
Yeah.
And even though it's a little off topic to talk about this movie, I will say that having been reminded of its core concepts, having read it like 20 years prior to seeing the movie, there's a lot of influence on The Witcher that you can see. Like the whole idea of like a group of secret, powerful people engineering, you know, a genetic creation and of a chosen one, that kind of thing, It's like
Yeah.
that's pretty similar to what's going on in The Witcher.
Yeah, the ideas of propaganda and of
Yeah.
like
Mhm. The power
soft power
schemes.
that's actually hard power and
Yeah.
Oh,
Bloodlines and
that's another
power and-
discussion.
yeah.
Okay.
So that's something I think is interesting, that because this is maybe something, this is an idea we'll flesh out. We can talk about it in the group. I want to hear feedback from listeners, but this is something I've been thinking about for History of Westeros, because there's so much fantasy out there and so much good sci-fi. As we could start, my idea was to start occasionally doing like the idea we have with our show. We wanted to make an episode about The Witcher through the lens of A Song of Ice and Fire. So people who are Song of Ice and Fire, Game of Thrones fans can get the picture of The Witcher using Game of Thrones, A Song of Ice and Fire terminology, right? To sort of explain, like comparing Cersei to Calanthe, things like that. We could do something like that on this show if people were interested in that. We could talk about Dune through the lens of The Witcher. We could talk about Star Wars through the lens of The Witcher. We could talk about, of course, Game of Thrones that way. So those are all things that, one day we could get to. Maybe when things are a little more established, when there's more of the story has been told, more of it's out there, we can do things like that. But yeah, since we're on the subject, I thought I'd throw that out there.
Michal, what are you excited for and what's next for you?
Ooh, well, I am excited. I mean, what am I like not excited? There's almost too much stuff. I'm like not
Right?
even excited. I'm more just like,
Hawkeye.
yeah, it's weird. I'm like in that
Overwhelmed.
space where I'm like, well, now I'm just expecting all this stuff.
Kind
Of course, I'm getting a
overwhelming, to be
Hawkeye
honest,
TV
right?
series.
We didn't
We're
have
getting
anything for a
spoiled, yeah.
while, and now we're getting spoiled. It's fucked up.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, yeah, I mean, honestly, like I'm excited for Boba Fett. I'm less excited for that than I would be if Baby Yoda was in it.
Mm.
I reject this idea that we should have any Star Wars without Baby Yoda in it anymore. But yeah, that'll be exciting. Hawkeye will be exciting. I'll be talking about that on my podcast, Level 7 Access, where we just also finished covering Loki and What If. Yeah, I'm just blathering on Twitter, ink as rain, about random things, writing my own stuff, that sort of thing. Yeah, I don't know. It's an exciting time. I like had to write some of the stuff like literally in my calendar to be like, this is when this is starting. This is when The Witcher's coming out. This is like don't forget these are important dates in your calendar.
Yeah. It's an exciting time. Exciting time.
It is.
And for me, people, before I spiel real quick, join our Facebook group, The Podcast of Surprise. We have cool discussions going on there. Great community of people. The Podcast of Surprise on Facebook. And for me, things are quite crazy, okay? The sale of my mom's house just happened yesterday, and I will be moving to a new city in like 3 weeks, less than 3 weeks. So guys, be patient with me while I try to get settled and all of that. It's been a very chaotic time for me, as all of you know. I'm trying my best. And the reason I'm trying to move now is so I can get nice and cozy before season 2 of The Witcher drops. That's my goal. So I think that will happen. Fingers crossed. Knock on wood for me, guys. I really need some consistency to go down for me, man, and some stability, but that's what I'm aiming for. So sorry if there aren't as many videos, but you will see me pop in here and there. But I do have a lot on my plate. So thanks for being patient. And yeah, just a big thank you. Thank you to Morley for the donation. And thank you all for joining here. We really, really appreciate it. Podcast is a prize, anchor.fm, or you can catch us next time here on YouTube. Thanks again, everyone. We shall see you in the next episode. Bye.